Just to tease Mickey, I'm going to have him do a sound check. Mickey. Not that he doesn't have enough stuff on his plate already.
Alrighty. Bill, yeah. This is Mickey speaking into an AKG 414 that is going into a Sound Devices 7440, going into an Avid Matrix 2, and that is going out to the Dante World Dante Virtual Sound Card. Audio hijack for some delay, loop back and out to Zoom.
You're perfect, as I expected.
I just power cycled the Roland UVCs, so we'll see what happens.
Fingers crossed.
If it doesn't go to black or switch inputs in the next 1 to 2 minutes, then it should be stable. That could have been it. I'm not sure. I've never seen that happen before. And there it goes again.
Oh, dear.
Your camera having overheat problems, perhaps?
Well, no, because I can see it in the multi-view. In the ATEM, it's fine. It's going into a Roland, going out from the ATEM HDMI out into a Roland encoder and then into Zoom, but it keeps switching to something called Stormer Desk View Camera. I think Stormer's the name of my iPhone. So it's like...
disconnect your iPhone.
Yeah, disconnect.
Well, my iPhone isn't connected to the computer, though, so I don't understand.
Well, remove that camera as a source if you can.
Maybe power off, hold the 2 buttons and power off the iPhone entirely so it can't even be found.
Or go into your iPhone settings, general, AirPlay handoff, and turn off continuity camera.
I'm turning off my iPhone entirely, and I'll do that next. I've never seen that happen before. I upgraded to iOS 18.1. I wonder if there's a correlation there.
Sometimes new stuff does that. I got a new Discord, and it's causing me all sorts of problems.
I don't know how stable this is going to be. I turned off my phone, but if it goes to black again, Bill, can you just take over?
We got the backup plan in place. Don't worry about it. Just
okay.
If I see you go to black, I'll hop.
Thank you. Good morning. Welcome to Office Hours. This is the show where we answer your technical questions as they relate to media and event production and more, 7 days a week. Let's get into our questions. Bill, what's our first one?
First one comes this morning from Scott Hancock in Tokyo. And Scott wonders how to feed one camera or mic source into 6 different Zoom calls, not interactively. The 6 are breakouts from a group meeting, but each needs interpreter function. He wants to generate that as an NDI source and have each call receive the same source.
Guy?
Yeah, this is where the guys from Basecamp Global, Jonas and Tucker, really shine. If you're doing this all the time, you can build it yourself. But the way that these guys do it is they do it in the cloud, where it's easy to spin up multiple machines and then have them all networked together. So the one NDI source can be pushed into other computers that can then go into those meetings and add that feed in, and then you can have your interpreters there. The cool thing with these guys is they're not just pushing a machine in. They can give you things like I've been in meetings where they've used LUFS meters on the return, so we'll have a U-lean for all these breakout rooms, so we could see at a glance without physically being in there and having to monitor anything. We could actually watch the levels visually. So it's not just a matter of pushing these things in, unless you have a lot of staff that can sit there and monitor that stuff. Because if you're on a multi-day event and you've got 6, 8, 10 breakout rooms, these guys at Basecamp have done 80 language channels. So I mean, they're not new to this. They do some of the biggest events in the world. So I would talk to Jonas and Tucker. But if you just want to get it done basic, you can do it with NDI yourself. The other thing is there is some tools from Zoom where you can use the share screen capability, and you can say share screen to broadcast to all breakout rooms. And then before, when you're setting up the meeting, you can say invite interpreters, and you could push it in that way. Going down that route, it's kind of the simple way, but there are some downfalls to that. But you can experiment, do it yourself, or so you got really 3 different options. Do it yourself with share screen, broadcast all rooms, use the interpreters that are built in. You may have some problems with playouts if you have playouts that are in English, for example, and then you need to push it down. So there's some pros and cons depending on your run of show as to how you want to actually have those folks interact or get the language in the native language or have everything interpreted. But yeah, the folks at Basecamp would be the people that I would call just to at least touch base and get some consulting done and figure out what your true needs are, because spinning up 8 machines to them is nothing. Like, they do it all the time to just say click, 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 click. It runs a script, it builds those machines, and then they're ready, they're stable, they do the stuff all the time. It's in the cloud, so it's hosted where you're not having to worry about power issues and data, the internet going down or any of that stuff. So I trust these guys, and they're worth giving a call. I don't know anybody else in the business who does what they do.
Mickey?
Yeah, it depends on how what your infrastructure is like. Is it in the cloud? Is it on-prem with hardware? If you already have an NDI-based infrastructure and you're comfortable with it, then yeah, I definitely go with NDI. If you're building this from scratch, I would probably go with Dante. It's what Dante does and does best. The distribution and transport of audio. So if it's from scratch, I'd build the Dante network. If you have infrastructure that is still primarily analog audio, you can get audio interfaces, analog audio interfaces for each of the machines. Again, this is for on-prem. Then send it a split, or if you have a stage box or a mixer with multiple outputs, you could send individual outputs from analog audio outputs into those separate audio interfaces. But yeah, I totally agree with Guy that using the built-in interpretation feature right within Zoom is a compromise, as opposed to fully generating a proper individual mix for each language from scratch. Things that we do primarily for on-prem hardware, like with actual mixing consoles, is, say, for example, if you have your domestic native language coming in, we would first have maybe 2 or 3 seconds of that domestic language seep in at full volume, and then do a nice, very gradual duck, and then bring in the interpretation right after that. And we do that with a couple layers of delays with both the ducking pipeline as well as the actual interpretation audio pipeline. So you have this nice in and out of the domestic native language and the interpreted language. So, and that's something that's done very common, done all the time on say proper broadcast boards from the likes of Calrec, Lavo. These boards are able to generate dozens of mixes right within a single board. So a single A1 or mix operator is typically handling all these all these languages at the same time.
Go ahead, Marty. Can't hear you.
Why am I black? Do I have the
Yes,
same problem? All right. Well, go ahead.
Okay.
All right, let's go to the
yeah.
Let's go to the next question.
Tony Mobley in Noonan, Georgia is up next on our roster. The new M4 Mac Mini is now a production mobile device? He's wondering.
Jeff.
So the even the bottom spec Mac, on every production, you always need extra computers to do all kinds of things. You need a computer to run Companion. You need something to feed graphics. You need something to bring in comments. You may need to host a website. All these kind of things. You need to look at your interface for your live streaming. If you're using Vimeo, you need to be able there to hit go live, or YouTube or any of those. So you need all these other functions, and that tiny little puck of the Mac Mini, even the bottom of the line, $600 version, seems like it would have tons of power to do that. A tiny, small keyboard and mouse. Doesn't even have to be the Apple one if you're not a fan of the cost of Apple devices. A cheap mouse and keyboard attached to that, and that makes a perfect little production assistant computer. Go up into a higher level one, and now you can. Hopefully this gets approved for use with Dante, and this could be a Dante virtual sound card machine, other jobs that this will do. But yeah, I do think you're going to see a lot of these kind of like the Apple version of a NUC stuck in little places where we need computing power. And I think that Mac Mini is really interesting in its power and the pro level chip, but I think the really interesting one is that sort of base level model that's so inexpensive that you can distribute that out in production.
Jeffrey.
Yeah, I totally agree. The base level model is perfect for SPX. It's perfect for a 1 to 2 camera type live stream that you could be doing with these smaller machines. With these smaller cameras, these machines will actually really. I'm going to call it the NUC killer, because I have in my remote system, I have an Intel NUC, and I have my M1, which many of you know I will take on travel with me. So I'll take an M1, and then I'll take a MacBook Air. I'll take my GLI net, which will be the go-between between the two, and then I'll remote into the M1 to do the major work, the transferring of files, the editing of files, and the uploading of files. And then I'll use my MacBook Air for, surfing while this is all processing. Now with the MacBook M4, which is 1 pound lighter than the M1. That was 2.6 pounds for that M1, and I believe the M2 was about the same. The M4 is 1.5 pounds for the regular and 1.6 for the Pro. And it's going to be such a game changer that I can now have 2 in my road case if I need to. And yes, I am going to be going for the Pro because the Pro is going to have Thunderbolt 5, whereas I believe Thunderbolt 4 is going to be on the just the M4 models. It's going to have the option for up to 10 gigabits per second Ethernet and a couple other features. I think that's also the 3 6K monitors. If you're going to run it that way, you got to get the Pro version. So I'm definitely going to get one, especially with the trade-in. The trade-in prices are awesome. So yeah, I'm really excited about that, and I'm definitely calling this a NUC killer.
Courtney.
I would never call it a NUC killer because there's a lot cheaper NUCs that do a lot more in there. You mentioned something like a production mobile device. Now, there's a lot of guys out there that use Mac Minis on their sound cart, and the problem in the past has been power. Most guys that do production recording in the field, to be mobile, they have to be independent of AC power because they might have to get there and set up. When a production has power provided by a generator, let's say, you're out in the field, You may not have no place to plug in or no power until they run all the cables and get the generators set up and turned on. And so you're without power until that happens. So most carts out there have some form of DC power, which means to power that Mac Mini, you're going to have to, the power supply is internal. Now, there have been guys in the past that hacked their Mac Minis to put a 12-volt power supply in it, but it's not for the non-brave of heart, and it will, of course, void your warranty. So you wouldn't want to do that on that new Mac Mini. You have to put in power supply circuits, and you have to drill a hole in the side, put a jack in to feed DC power in. And since nobody has seen the power supply on the new Mac Minis yet, we don't know how complex it has to be, whether it requires 2 DC voltages on the output of that internal power supply or not. So you're going to have to run off an inverter, and it's going to have to be a sine wave inverter to avoid throwing hashy noise into your audio. So if you're using it as a production mobile device, be prepared to buy a high-quality inverter to power it if you're going to be powering it off a DC or at least some other source. A better option would be, if you have to stay in the Mac world, would be a new M4 MacBook Pro because, hey, it has batteries built in automatically. You don't have to worry about the power going out and having to put it on a UPS so you don't have to reboot it if it loses power. And it has its own screen because, you're going to have to carry a screen around for that Mac Mini, at least one. But, if you do want a NUC, much better choice, $150, has all the ports, runs on 12 volts DC, and it runs everything that can run on Windows 4, including Resolve 18.
Mickey.
Yeah, and just to add, the MacBook Pro can also be powered off of USB-C, which is much easier to set up for in terms of like location sound card recording situation. But yeah, just to add to what Courtney said, the previous iteration of the Mac Minis as well as the Mac Studios require only a single 12-volt rail as opposed to the Intel ones, which required 12 volts, 5 volts, and 3 volts. So I would imagine that the new Mac Mini form factor would still keep that design wherein the actual main board requires just a 12-volt rail. But I do know some people that have done that mod to run Mac Minis off of card power 12 volts.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
155 watts is what the Mac Mini M4 will take completely. And I've plugged them into these portable generators, these non-gas generators. One of them's a lithium phosphate battery. And, an 8-hour day, it can handle that without a problem. If you start plugging more stuff into the battery, you're absolutely going to have to think about power management. And some of these batteries, like the battery I'm talking about, it actually recharges within 1 hour, and it will charge as it's dispensing, which is a great feature of lithium phosphate.
Next question.
Craig Kadoki in Toronto. 2 things about the new Mac Mini that concern me. Taller than 1 rack unit now, and the power button is on the bottom. Otherwise, I'm quite impressed. Anyone else have concerns about these 2 points?
Jeffrey.
Well, as for the 1RU, that's things change, people change, items change, and so there's not much you can do about that but reconfigure. But the size of the Mac Mini will allow you to kind of reconfigure how you have it set up, so that's not going to be much of a problem. As for that button, yeah, it is on the bottom. Most people don't turn off their Mac Minis, so a lot of people are not going to have a problem with that if they have to tip it up every now and then just to hit the button. But I am on a couple 3D threads out there, and there are people that are already designing button alternatives so you can have a side press and then turn that Mac Mini on.
Yeah, I can't remember what company it was. Maybe Sonitech. They have a rack mount solution chassis for the Mac Mini, and they devised a mechanical switch that would reach around to the back and push that power button. So obviously that'll have to be redesigned. It'll be interesting to see how they manage to get a different power button solution for that one. Courtney.
Yeah, both of those are big problems. I think taller than 1 RU. If you're going to mount a bunch of them in a rack mount, it's going to take 1.5 units of rack space if you're going to stack them side by side. And the other thing is, if you're going to bolt them into a rack, you're not going to be able to lift them up to punch that power button. The other problem that my Mac Mini has, we don't know, nobody's got the new ones yet here, at least till next Friday. Is there a way to set the power on state to come on if power is lost and reapplied? That's the big question. Right now, I think Mac Minis, if they lose power, if they lose AC power, you got to hit the button to start them back up again because they don't default back to the power condition that they were in when it lost AC power. That remains to be seen whether that might be a BIOS setting. They'd be able to go into it and change that settings in the Mac Mini. So that's an important consideration also for Alex, who stacks his up one after another. There's not enough room to get a finger in there to turn that power button on. Why they put the power button on the bottom is idiotic. I cannot imagine why they thought that was a good idea. What were they thinking?
Bill.
I think people are going to work around this. I think you're going to find out that there is a way to manage power remotely with these somehow. There's got to be some little trickle battery in there or something that's going to do this. Apple always manages to do these things. In this particular case, making something that was very popular significantly smaller with more capability and more power than the thing was before. And I know some people are against that idea. They think that it's much better trade to have everything bigger. But I remember doing supply chain videos where things like the shipping cost of something that is smaller than other things when you're shipping 3 million of them out is a significant way to keep your prices down. If you can get the same container ship and do 6 million units as opposed to 3 million units, you don't have to send the ship twice to get restocked. So there's just a whole ton of other things behind the scenes that go into the form factor of products. And I think they spend a lot of time thinking about those kind of things. My 2 cents.
Can you imagine if the same person that decided to put the charging port on the bottom of the Magic Mouse is the same person that designed the power button on the new Mac Mini just to mess with people?
Well, it was Johnny Ive on the original Magic Mouse.
The Johnny Ive, yes.
Yeah,
Jeffrey?
He's gone.
So the reason why they have at least what I've been reading is the reason why that button is on the bottom is because of how much less stuff is inside of that Mac Mini that creates the airflow is created with inside, and that button is in a place where it doesn't get affected by the airflow, which I'm assuming that there's a sensor next to it. So if the Mac Mini does overheat, it will turn itself off. And so I'm guessing that's why that button is placed there. Yeah, it's inconvenient, but like we've said, there's already people that are designing ways to work around that.
Go ahead, Courtney.
And another thing, if in designing power supplies, if you have a single push button turn on, it's got to keep that AC power supply alive all the time in order to generate the 3 volts wake up voltage to start up the PC. So in the past, that's why there were 3 rails. If it's a 12 volt rail, they've got to keep the whole power supply, a single 12 volt rail, like Mickey was saying, they're going to have to keep the whole power supply powered up 24/7, even when it's off. So Apple being green, like they always claim to be, and very eco-friendly, having the power supply on all the time is not very eco-friendly, but, I may be talking out of my hat because we haven't actually seen the electronics of it. We'll wait for that teardown that they're going to put online probably about 10 minutes after they are received.
iFixit's probably inside of one right now if they could get it pre-release.
Yeah, exactly. Next question.
Well, next one comes from Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. Compare the Magewell Director Mini 3.0 to the ATEM Mini as an all-in-one production tool. And he's got a link there to a streamingmedia.com article.
Jeffrey.
I love the Director Mini, and I don't have one, but I have one that's very, very close, and that is this. This is the OBSBot Talent, which is technically the Director Mini. The only thing that this doesn't have that the Director Mini has is the ability to control it through an app. And you could do a lot of stuff through the app, the graphics, you can do the switching. So you can have somebody on a phone switching, you have another person on a phone doing graphics, you have another person on a phone doing the color, but everything else interface on this is exactly the same. It's all touch screen. So ATEM does have the advantage with physical buttons, but you can definitely do the switching. And my favorite thing is this right here. I'm going to switch over cameras really quick, which you won't notice the difference too much. But now I've got an in-app telestrator right here. So I can do a lot of fun little things with that, and then switch back and forth. With the ATEM, of course, goes into the Blackmagic infrastructure, so you can use the app, and you can use things like Mix FX Pro. The Magewell does have a Stream Deck app that you can connect up to it. So you'll be able to remote it from there. And I'm guessing within the next year, we're going to see a lot more improvements in the software that they're using. So I personally think that when it comes to remote stuff and with the batteries in the back on the Magewell, I think that with that, this is going to become more of a remote type streamer rather than the ATEM, which you do have to plug in, you do have to cord up and go from there, because this can take SRT, this can take NDI, and this can take HDMI and USB cameras.
Looks like a really cool product. Now I feel a little left out that I don't have a telestrator. That's next on my shopping list. Next question.
Jeffrey Reyes in the Bronx, New York. Alex isn't here, but we're going to take on this. If you were to purchase the new Mac Mini, what would you spec it out with? Would you do max specs, the M4 Pro 20-core, 64 gigabytes of RAM and 8 terabyte SSD to be the next move?
Jeffrey, start us off.
Yeah, I've already mentioned this before. I'm going to go for the Mac Pro when I get the cash to do that, because it's going to be a buy once, cry once, but you're going to have all the features that you need. It says it can do up to 8 terabytes of storage, so I'm hoping that that's going to have some sort of ability. You probably have to buy it all at once. There's probably going to be no disconnect change memory storage type option in there. But once again, with the Thunderbolt 5, with the 6K monitor support, with the 10 gigabits per second Ethernet, it's just not a question when it comes to higher end production.
Jeff.
So I just went through the Apple site, and this came up to $4,700. By the time you put Apple Care on there, you're at $5,000, and you're putting that in a tiny little puck that we don't know how the heat inside there. I know they say they've got this new fan cooling system, airflow, but is the heat gonna throttle that M4 Pro 20 core as you get really cranking in there? You're putting a lot of eggs and a lot of dollars in one tiny little basket. So I would probably not spec it to that level. Definitely the Pro chip. And then I would also wait, because we're probably getting another announcement today and then maybe another one tomorrow. Probably a Mac Studio is a better place to spend $5,000 than in this M4 Mini. The Mini is really optimized for size, which has to make compromises.
Mickey.
Yeah, of course, I could take a look at what my budget is. But I would, for me, like for my specific use case, not much of the work I do tax the CPU much at all, because most of the processing I do happens on external DSP cards. So I would prioritize upgrading the chip the least. Saying that though, for my use case, RAM is really crucial. So I would bump up the unified memory the most, and saying with that, the M4 Pro is capable of handling more. You can add more RAM to the higher end chips. So there's sort of a balance you have to deal with there. But for me, I'd rather prioritize the RAM. For storage, I do not store any important data on internal data storage on computers, especially Macs, because the memory chips are soldered onto the board. So if something happens to the machine, you lose the data. So I would not add on any data storage to the base model at all.
Bill?
Yeah, I think this is going to 100% depend on your particular practice and what you do. I've had a couple of different career areas in my life where I've needed different kinds of systems. Here at my desk, I need one thing. When many times that I used to work in hotel rooms and things like that on site, but I was in a relatively fixed position, I needed another kind of system. So I moved from a desktop to a laptop. If I was out on the road doing the kind of shows that I used to be involved with, where I go on location in a city for a couple of weeks, but it's in a convention center or something like that, the fact that you can now put a monster system for creative work inside a small briefcase or a tiny belt pack, to me, is just gobsmacking. If you get your basic laptop, so you have one monitor and a couple of flat panel monitors and a couple of these little tiny monstrously powerful machines, you have an amazing production capability that you can set up in a coffee shop in 2 minutes and do everything that I could do with the most expensive systems that I've ever paid for over the course of my career. This is just the capabilities of this, and I think it's the same on the PC side. There's just so much more capability now in such a small form factor. And these things are so much more affordable than having to lease equipment like I used to. It's just really the golden age of personal creativity computing. And I think for all of us, we have to just be appreciative of where we are now and what we can do without having to mortgage our houses in order to do it. My 2 cents.
Guy.
Yeah, I'm excited to try them all, actually. I'm a bit of a maniac, but I'll probably wind up trying a couple different models, and it depends on what people want to do with them. We're doing some stuff with Mimo Live where we're running different versions for different things that we're doing. So I have an M2, and this is for testing purposes. I just bought a regular base model M2 to see how many feeds I could push out of it. And then we have an Ultra over here that was $3,999. And Oliver just messaged me, and he's like, hey, I think that the new Pro is going to do what we needed to do to push 8 feeds. And I was like, wow, we just spent $4,000 on that one a couple months ago. And now you're saying for $1,999, we can do it. So literally half the price. So I see a lot of opportunity for people like Mac Stadium that have done cloud-based Macs. So before you would rent an M1 for about $100 a month. So I'm excited to see what you can do in the cloud with Macs at this price, because if you can't just rack a whole bunch of them, they had 18,000 computers at Mac Stadium. So I'm wondering now how many more of these things that they're going to get, and where that processing power starts to really come into play. Like, let's say, for instance, you want a DaVinci Resolve farm in the cloud. You could do that with Mac Stadium, or I'd like to do it here. There's been some discussions I've had with a production company where we would just put the local the storage here, the NAS. So then we could have 10 editors come into 10 Mac Minis, and that's super cheap because they could be in a coffee shop editing, and you'd be shocked at how well Final Cut runs through Splashtop. When you're remote scrubbing the timeline, it's like you're on the machine locally. So I'm excited to see for people that are remote that need the horsepower of these fast machines, but also the bandwidth. So somebody's remote, they're shooting, somebody else they're uploading it, somebody else is capturing that and being able to go through and metadata, tag everything, and then maybe even assemble, edit something, and then another editor and a colorist all come in. So these machines make that workflow super exciting because it's distributed and it's cheap, because $599 for a computer is insane. It's just never been a thing before.
Jeffrey.
And to add to that, what Guy just said, they made a hint as to what's going to happen with Final Cut Pro, the next version. And a lot of people are saying that's a CapCut killer for what they're going to be introducing in the next day or two. So I definitely is something to look at. And I can't wait to see what Mac Stadium will do. And I might just add, if I have internet access, proper internet access, I might just add it to my business plan.
Next question.
Andy Kokendorfer in Vieira, Florida comes up next. Has anyone else acquired the new Sony M1 headphones? I find them to have improved bass response and better isolation. Thoughts?
Jeff.
So I've not tried them, but Andy left out the most important letters here, which was these are the MDR M1s. So this is basically Sony trying to improve on the MDR V6 and the MDR 7506, which we all know and love so well. They're trying to like make these the studio monitors. One thing I love about them is the detachable cord, which is so important. I'm actually really excited to try these headphones out when I get a chance.
Marty.
Yeah, me too. I'd love to try them out. And yeah, they look like the classic Sony studio monitors, headphones that we've been using for decades now. I see that if you have any faith in specifications, they are spec'd from 5 hertz to 80,000 hertz, which is beyond the capability of most studio monitors. Of course, they don't say what tolerance that is, whether it's within how many dB, so we don't know how flat they are or what the characteristic voicing curve of them are. But if they are reasonably flat and true and trustworthy in their sound quality, yeah, they should do very well.
Sorry, I lost my screen there for a second.
I think Courtney's up next.
It's
Courtney,
me.
go
It's
ahead.
me. Yeah, I have not bought them yet. I still like my MDR V6s. At $249 or 1.5. I mean, they're 2.5 times the price of the 7535 or the MDR 6s. I'm not sure I like the straight cords. I like a coily cord. It has a removable cord, and it has I guess a mini plug. I'm not sure if that's a screw-on lock on there, because that would be important so it doesn't pop out if you hit the end of your cord. Since it's non-stretchy cord, you're always getting up and having them around your neck and not realizing it, and putting a lot of stress on that cord if it's a non-stretchy cord. So that maybe they make a stretchy cord for it. I don't think it folds as flat as and compact as the 7535s. There's a comparison. This guy does a comparison of the 7506s and the MDR M1s. And having a frequency response that goes to 80,000 is just for people that want to compare specs. You can't really hear anything above 17,000 anyway. And besides, if you're listening to, really great hip-hop stuff that has a big bass line, and that 5 hertz handling of this is going to make you deaf to anything above about 12,000 cycles. So, who needs that high frequency response once you put these headphones on and crank up the power?
Mickey.
Yeah, I think Andy has mentioned that it provides better bass response. Just going back to what others have mentioned earlier, people have been using the 7506 and the V6s for decades. A change in response to me is a change to what people are used to hearing and listening to. So for me, that would, if I were to use something that sounded different, that would throw me off because I'd have to relearn this new set of cans. So I think for me, I'd rather stick with the 7506.
Next question.
Craig Kadoki's up next, and Craig says, Alex Lindsay has talked in the past about using his Mac Studio as a portable with a keyboard, mouse, and monitor at home and office. How many people will use the new Mini that way? And he notes,
Mickey.
I will.
Yeah, for me, I have separate systems for different use cases. I carry a MacBook Air for a daily driver, email, calendar, and all that. And I have a 16-inch Pro if I have to do some light work out in the field. And if I need more horsepower, I'd take a rack with Mac Studios in it. So I'd prefer to bring the right tool for the job and not be hindered by, I need to answer an email. I need to bring out the Mac Mini, a monitor, a keyboard, and a mouse just to answer email. I'll just bring out my laptop for that.
Courtney.
Yeah, I think a laptop makes more sense, or an M4 Air if they are going to release one. It would make more sense because it's battery powered. You don't need to find a plug to plug it in. You don't have to have a screen to set up and plug in. You don't have to have a keyboard you pull out, and a mouse to pull out to use it. So it's a bit problematic to use as a portable office away from the office. Makes much more sense just to have a nice, sleek laptop bag and stick that in there. You don't have to worry about carrying all those accessories around.
Bill.
The interesting thing to me is what is going to be the delta if, as there is wide speculation out in the marketplace, there's a new laptop today based on the M4, particularly the Mac Pros up at the top end with kind of some serious grunt behind them. Then what is the delta between that and a kind of connect yourself system that you can take out for mobile computing or for at least on a table at a convention or something like that type of computing? And I think that's going to determine for everybody whether they go with one way or another. You get more flexibility if you have all the separate components because you can kind of hook things up in a tinker toy arrangement the way you exactly like. So a lot of people are going to be very positive about that, particularly those who like to bring out a rack and have a couple of computers in the rack and that kind of thing. That makes perfect sense. We have seen racks that have a drawer, though, that slides out for a laptop. So again, I'm going back to what's the delta going to be? What are the actual specs of this theoretical M4 MacBook Pro Max? And how close is that to the performance? And if it doesn't reach the level of the minis and things like that well configured, that's one thing. If it tends to go farther than that and pushes into the zone of what the studios and the bigger kind of AV computers can do, that's also going to be different. I've been shocked. If you had told me 10 years ago before I started moving to an all-laptop system that I would be able to do this kind of thing that I'm doing right now, surrounded by 4 monitors, an overhead TV, and everything was driven perfectly well just by a single laptop, I wouldn't have believed you. But that's where we are now. So for me, the question is, what is this next release is it going to push the bar even higher? And if so, is it so high that I don't have to think about another kind of computer for the rest of my career? We'll see.
Courtney.
Yeah, what I slip in my laptop bag for computing away from computing is one of these melees that slips into your laptop bag, and you can plug it. Let's say you're in a hotel room. This has HDMI out. You just plug it into the HDMI input on the hotel TV, and you get one of these small wireless keyboard and mouse combos, and then you can use it to do stuff on this large hotel room TV and not have to drag a monitor around with you, and the melees run off of 5 volts, so you can run off a battery power pack, a charger for your phone. So that works well too.
Guy.
Yeah, one of the things that you could do is put these little dummy dongles, HDMI dongles in there, and then run them headless. Or what we've done is also used a quad display, so you can use whatever size monitor you want just to look and see multiple Mac Minis in a rack or wherever you want. But the other thing that I use is something called a Splash Top. And what that does is when I log in and I hit refresh, I could see all those computers as they're online. So I could, from one computer, I can open up 4 Mac Minis and I could rearrange those screens to however big that I want. I can monitor certain things that I want or bring them to the front or control them very easily. Or I could pass that duty off to somebody else that's offsite and they could take control over that. So if you guys haven't tried Splash Top, it's pretty amazing because the fluidity of the screen activity it's much better than anything that you've seen from TeamViewer or from Chrome Desktop remote viewing. So controlling these Mac Minis remotely is something you guys got to try just to believe it. It's really cool when you do it and you see and feel it like it's local. So something to think about.
Next question.
David Brady's up next from New York City. So IT just pushed out iOS 18.0.1, and I'm wondering what the advantages of the new Passwords app is over my well-established use of 1Password. Keep in mind, I do not live wholly in the Appleverse, and so cross-platform is a requirement.
Jeffrey.
Yeah, David, that's a big issue for me as well. I'm still a little bit hesitant on using any type of passwords app because anything can be hacked. And yeah, even though Apple's really tried to secure down their infrastructure, there's always a chance that they can get hacked too. Now, with the Passwords app, it was mentioned at WWDC that Passwords app will work across iOS, iPad, Mac, and Windows. Notice something missing there? Android. They're not going to, at least not at this point, are they going to be making a version that'll go across Android devices. So if you have to pick up an Android device and you want your passwords, then 1Password is the way to go. Plus, there are some other features that 1Password has that Apple's infrastructure, their security infrastructure, won't allow. So you'll be able to do a lot more with 1Password. It's great, like if you're within the Apple infrastructure. It's great, but if you are secular like yourself and myself, then you might want to stick with the password manager that you're using, at least for now.
Bill?
I'm just looking forward to the day I don't have to remember any passwords. It's coming with all the biometrics. I mean, I am in a single system, so I don't have to think about that. But boy, it's just such a relief not to have to add, edit, keep around, make sure it's on all the machines. Just the biometrics of Face ID or Touch ID or some of those things, when they get better and better at this, and with now the automation of all the two-factor identification, so that if there's a question by the machine about whether or not I'm supposed to be getting into the access of this, and it sends something to my phone that I can put my thumb on, and it just fixes all the problems, that is just so much easier than all these years of having to Greek and put in notepad lists, passwords, and hide them behind things. It's just, I like simple. Simple's good.
Courtney?
Yeah, I've just been dipping my toe into the new passkeys thing from Google, which allows you to authenticate and standardize all your passwords for all your websites with a single biometrics login. Or it ties into your phone so that if you unlock it with a pattern, let's say it works on Android, I think it works on iOS as well. It's cross-platform, and it is quite secure. It's all encrypted stores your passwords in the cloud so that you don't have to worry about, which machine did I have my password chain, on, and do I have to remember the key password? You just use your thumb and you're in. And it works quite well so far. And it shares any of those passwords that you put on one machine with any of your other machines.
Yeah, I think passkeys are the future, and that seems to be what a lot of security experts who are not me are saying. And it's, once you experience that whole interaction with passkeys, it just seems like it's sorcery. The fact that it can just log in like that without any kind of interaction, which is awesome. As far as cross-platform compatibility, what a lot of people are using now is Bitwarden. I know some people in the chat are talking about Bitwarden, which is a great open source solution, which is available across all platforms, and they have a good mobile app. So that seems to be a rock solid, so far very secure solution for password management for that. And that's pretty much it. I use the Apple Password Manager. It does have some deficiencies. I came from 1Password. I do miss being able to create secure notes and being able to add documents, which right now I'm kind of getting by just using the Apple Notes app, and then I just lock the note for things like my email account details and that sort of stuff. So hopefully over time, as the password manager in Mac OS and iOS evolves, they'll add additional fields and allow you to add that kind of data as well. Next question.
Paul Wallace, in from Austin, Texas, debuting the IBC, the small rig RC 220B Pro LED video light is $329 for the daylight version and $369 for the bicolor. What is the use case for each of these?
Guy.
Yeah, this is a really interesting light. There used to be a company that was the leader in lighting, and they acquired another company that had this product that's called the Lowell GL1, and it was heavily patented. And so this thing has a focusing Fresnel lens on the front, and then it almost looks like a drill where you would push this button to be able to activate the light, and then it had a battery. So all this stuff is extremely patented, and it's crazy to think that these guys, they small rig explored the market, and they said, hey, what's out there? And this handle is Paul's question is, how would you use this in the field? You could see that they've got this thing on battery, so the battery could mount to the bottom or to the back. If you want the studio version of this light, it doesn't come with this ability to add this handle. It comes with a 5/8 stud that you would put, or female adapter spigot that you would add to the top of a light stand. But this is exciting because you can add this softbox. You can have hard light or soft light in a portable on-the-go package. It's not that bad priced, and I don't know how they're getting around the patent. I'd imagine if Lowell was super active, they could probably knock this off the market. But it's interesting because when I first saw it, I looked at what Amaran has, because I have this one here for $349, and it's similar, but the battery is not on the back. It doesn't have that ability to. So here's the regular 5/8 spigot that you see for a studio type light. So they have this in what's called the mobile version. If you go to Small Rig site, there's actually two versions. So you'll see that it says mobile version, or mobile standard version versus mobile. So two different SKUs. So make sure you get the one that you want. And then there's two different models: the 100 and the 250, I believe, is the other one, 220B. And this video is worth watching. That is from our friends at News Shooter that give the first look at IBC. So if you want the boots on the ground 3-minute video, I'll put a link to the chat to this video, and you guys can watch it yourself.
Bill.
Small Rig has done really well lately. They're come out of the just Tinker Toy cage stuff, and they have a lot of products. This is interesting as an OEM thing. There are a lot of things I like about this. Since we moved to Cobb's, chip on board, these big, large sensor chips that emit light and work more like a point source light than the LED arrays, which were a hassle. You'll notice this also has a Bowens mount on it. I think that's a traditional size Bowen mount. I hope so. I hope it's not a mini. That just means there's already a gigantic array of light modifiers out there. Everybody in the photography business, and it's moved gigantically into the video business with these continuous lights. Everybody understands that ecosystem, even though Bowens didn't survive as a technical brand, didn't survive the pandemic and went under. That light rig means that there's an incredible number of soft boxes, beauty dishes, enhancers, all just an incredible array of grip equipment that lets you shape and mold your light. So those are all good things. The only thing I ever wonder about these new ones, these Cobbs that are coming out now are so bright and they dim pretty well, but I would look at them through what is their maximum intensity and their minimum intensity. The smaller and more intense the light, the more you need to have some kind of diffusion on it to do anything other than cast super hard shadows that can be very unflattering to anybody who's not 16 years old and has perfect skin. So I pay attention to that kind of light emitting surface, and these are pretty big, pretty good. It looks like a pretty good price. I would be interested in living with and trying these out for a while, the kind of lighting I do. So those are my 2 cents.
Courtney.
Yeah, just commenting on what Guy was saying about the patent from Lowell Light. These kind of work on a different technology. Maybe that's how they're getting by it, because they have the Lowell had a quartz bulb that sat and moved within that reflector to change its focal length, its focal width. So it could give you a broader pattern or a narrower pattern. If they're doing that in this particular light, maybe what they're doing is just lighting up, since it's this Cobb emitter here, which is a whole series of tiny LEDs on a single chip. If they're maybe changing, like they'll light up just the outer ring of them for a broader light, or maybe just the inner ring inside here to give you a narrower pattern to change the focal width, because it doesn't look like there's any kind of Fresnel, and it doesn't look like that the reflector moves in relationship to the Cobb. So I'm not sure how they're changing if they are changing the width of the beam that comes out of that, or if it's just you change it by putting a diffusion box in front of it. I'm not sure. So, but apparently they've dodged the patent issue. If that patent hasn't run out, patents are usually only good for about 20 years, and Lowell has had those portable lights out for 40 years. So,
Bill.
Yeah, I wanted to come back in with one thing because I was looking at the photos of it and I noticed this. This is the rear view of it, I think, and it does have a pretty large fan in there. So one other thing I would take a look at is what does this sound like when it's running full out? If that cob of that size is going to put out a lot of heat. So not as much as a old tungsten lamp, so you're still way ahead, but it looks like it's generating some heat that needs to be dealt with.
Guy.
Yeah, and at Infocom, I know Paul was watching as we visited the Felix booth. One of the lights that they had was a focusing Fresnel, and it's really tough to get that focusing ability on one of these lights that's portable. So if you're looking for this type of hard light that's focusable, that's battery operated, look at Felix. So these guys are color accurate, like they have the best LEDs on the market. So take a look at Felix and see what they're doing. As far as this unit, when they show in the demo with the softbox, the cameras are so sensitive these days that you can get away with using a light this small. It's amazing to watch that demo and go, man, we've come a long way from when we had to bring in just huge. If you saw what I'm being lit with right now, it's monster softboxes, and for a portable package where you're not going to get much noise in the shadows with even an iPhone, it's pretty spectacular to have this kind of light in a portable package just to fill in, especially if there's overhead lights in a room, like they show an art gallery in this example, and then they're just filling in the shadows, so you're getting you're under the chin lit up and you're getting under the eyes, so you don't get those raccoon eyes. So really cool, and that's what that GL1 light was used a lot for by wedding photographers. Actually, wedding photographers would use that GL1 and pop it. They would have an assistant pop that light to fill in those shadows and make people look great in robust moving environments, dance floors, out on location where they just don't want to be having to bring in huge lights. So the GL1 was a popular light back in its day. I don't understand why it got discontinued, but I don't understand why they're not actively pursuing their patents. They got bought by Tiffin. Maybe Tiffin doesn't know what they got.
Next question.
Jeff Francis is up next here on the panel. Columbia, South Carolina. Pro Tools system is currently running an original M1 Mac Mini with PCI card in a one-rack unit chassis. Do I upgrade to a refurbished M2 Mini so that I can fit in the chassis, or the new M4 Mini?
Mickey.
Yeah, for me, I think if you're on a budget, then I'd look at the refurb M2 and keep the same chassis you have. But if you're not necessarily on a limited budget, then switching over to the new form factor is something that would you'd have to do either at some point in time anyway. So I would just if budget permits, just upgrade to the new form factor along with the chassis that comes with it.
Jeffrey.
So the base price of the M4 is going to be $599, but the on M1, I just looked it up. I used M1s going for about $400. So the M2 will probably be around $450 to $500. If you're really lucky, you find something refurbished that's going to be less than $400. But really, is that a price difference? And for what you're going to get with the M4, because it's also going to upgrade on the storage to 512, and so I think that's going to be the factor. And I definitely would try and reconfigure my cases to fit the M4, and even if it's the lowest end M4.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, so the chassis is 1U. It fits the old style Mac Mini. So if I go with something that's not that, then the chassis still sits there. It's a Thunderbolt chassis, and the computer sits on top of the 1RU. And so that could be a Mac Studio. That could be a new M4. But again, it's just a thought about where to go. And it wouldn't be base model, and I wouldn't be replacing the chassis. So I either use the chassis with a computer in it, or the chassis is still just a PCI chassis and the computer sits external to that.
Mickey.
Yeah, if that's the case, then I'd just use the chassis as a PCI expander, and get the shelf to house the Mac Mini. But going back to what Jeffrey was mentioning earlier, this is a machine that was just announced yesterday. So refurbished and used prices would certainly have to go down for them for folks that are selling them to be viable on the market. So I'll look in a couple of weeks and look at the prices of the used units or refurbished units.
Another thing to keep in mind, this is the frustrating ongoing thing with Avid software, is that as of the latest October 2024.10 update, they still don't have support for Sequoia. So sure, if you're going to buy an M4, just keep in mind it is going to ship with Sequoia, and I don't know how easily or if at all you can downgrade, because that OS is probably going to have support for the new M4 chips and certain features there. So that's always something to consider as well. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Ronnie Hofsøy in Trumps to Norway. Best middle and budget capture card solution for a single or multiple inputs on a Mac. Preferred instances would be physical, like a USB-C or Thunderbolt, but please discuss NDI and others as well. Requirement is going into Mimo Live or similar on a Mac.
Mickey.
I would probably recommend on the low end, look at the Ultra Studio Recorder 3G Thunderbolt interfaces to bring in. Of course, it would limit you to 3G SDI connectivity, but this is a nice, very cheap interface at $125 US. Above that, I'd take a look at the UTAP SDI. This from AJA, so nice, reputable brand, very reliable. And if you need the more inputs, I'd probably look at a DeckLink card. It's a shame that Memo Live doesn't have direct support for AJA cards. Otherwise, I'd recommend a Kona card for the higher end. And if the Roland interfaces had SDI, then I'd recommend their UVC line of the UVC 001 for a nice UVC interface. If you just need HDMI though, then you might want to consider the UVC 01.
Guy.
Yeah, it depends on what your sources are and how far away they are and what kind of color that you want. I really like the DeckLink line inside of a Sonnet box. So this is just the size that it looks like with Thunderbolt. So you can easily carry this in, or there are rack mount versions of the Sonnet. Depending on how cheap you want to go and how risky you want to get, there is the Zowie-Tech NDI converter if you want the higher end one. There's the Magewell, and then you can get these in HDMI or SDI. I do like the UTAPs that Mickey was recommending. I also have the Bird Dog converters if you need 4K. It just depends, again, how far you're going, if you need fiber, if you need to do any kind of conversions there, how many inputs. But yeah, NDI is a world where once you get into it, you can see that you can do lots of routing and things like that. So it depends on how many other sources and computers that you're pulling into your show. So is it 8 inputs? Because the flexibility of a router, you just once you get one, you really understand that I can put anything anywhere that I need it to go. And so in the baseband world, you're looking at a 12 input from Blackmagic or Open Gear and putting stuff in there that way. But all of a sudden, it opens up a world. And so you can do that with NDI, but how technical do you want to get? So that's those are some of the questions that we need to ask.
Next question.
Ian Alford in London says, building a budget 4K edit setup, what monitor should I use for color?
Mickey.
Yeah, even if you are cutting 4K, doesn't mean that for coloring you would need a UHD or 4K color display. So I'd probably look at more affordable color monitors or production monitors in the sub $2,000 or $3,000 US dollar range. So I'd probably look at brands like Bon. Bon is the higher end sister company of ICANN. So I'd look at their monitors. They have 24-inch monitors that are sub $2,000 US dollars, as well as TV Logic. TV Logic has nice affordable monitors. Again, sub $2,000, sub $3,000 monitors. For interface, probably look at the Ultra Studio Monitor 3G. Again, just 3G SDI 1080. If you're just using it for color, you don't necessarily need to see every single pixel unless you're also dealing with adding grain to your color pipeline.
Bill?
And I'm going to say, you didn't note whether you're Mac or PC, but I've eschewed external color monitors and only go with my laptop. Why? Because Apple has a managed color pipeline. There are more iOS and Apple devices out there than anything else. And if I get things okay for this, I'm pretty sure that 80% of my audience is going to be able to watch it with the color that I've intended. I am not saying that if you are in the PC world or if you're delivering to broadcast or something like that, you shouldn't have a balanced color monitor. You should, but you can get away these days with delivering to that pipeline with their stock tools. Just saying.
Well, that wraps the first hour. Thanks very, very much for everyone answering those questions. Just a reminder, if you'd like to support the show, you can buy our limited edition t-shirt now by going to officehours.global/shop, and $20 of that will go direct to supporting the show. Stick around for the second hour. Of course, you can get those questions in. We have Ron Newmyer coming in from BandHouse Gigs to talk about setting up 75 artists to produce a live tribute concert. So that's fantastic. And you can get those questions in either through Mukana or the QR code.
I get to welcome to Office Hours Ron Newmyer from BandHouse Gigs. They've been assembling artist packages for more than 20 years from a pool of more than 75 different artists. They do live tribute concerts. They featured artist cover acts bringing the music of folks like Joni Mitchell, Stevie Wonder, Jimi Hendrix, and many, many more to live audiences. They predominantly serve the D.C. and Maryland, Virginia area, and they are a nonprofit. So we'll be able to talk about all those things in the mix. Ron, welcome to Office Hours. Great to have you here.
Thank you so much. I'm very happy to be here.
Well, we've been looking forward to this for a while. Can you give us a start with telling us how you got started in kind of producing these kind of amazing shows?
Sure. I'm a longtime D.C. area musician, more than 40 years playing all kinds of music around the D.C. area. And in that time, I've come to know hundreds and hundreds of great area musicians. The pinnacle of my music career, I guess, was playing bass in the touring band for Nils Lofgren, who's the guitar player for Bruce Springsteen, but also has quite a career on his own for 50 years. I was asked in 2004 to produce a tribute concert to Nils at a area place called Strathmore here in the D.C. area. And it was a big success. It was an outdoor free show. We had 5,000 people show up, largely because I was able to convince Nils to come and do a reunion of his first band, which was called Grin, for the first time in 35 years. And I put together a show that kind of covered different aspects of his career, and it was a review-style tribute with most of the performers only sang one or two songs in the show, so there was a lot of variety. And out of that, I was approached by the organization to do a second tribute show the next year, and we did a tribute to the group The Band, and I called in more of my friends to kind of help me put it together. And out of that, this organization, BandHouse Gigs, was born. And it's been going now for 20 years. We've put on 36 unique tribute shows to all kinds of different artists. We've appeared at 5 or 6 of the top venues in the D.C. area. And just to correct, we're technically not a nonprofit, we're a not-for-profit, which is, as one of my partners says, a great way of saying you're just good enough business to break even. But we never were doing any of these things to try and make money. It was always basically kind of because we wanted to do a great tribute to someone whose music we loved. And it wasn't planned this way, but it became quite a different thing as well, where we were able to shine a spotlight on the immense amount of talent in the D.C., Maryland, Virginia area and put people together in unique combinations for songs on the show. And so it's become kind of a community bonding event when we do the BandHouse Gig shows. We do two of them a year. In 2013, I started a second concert tribute organization, this one for-profit, called Newmyer Flyer, and I've done probably another 25 or 30 unique Newmyer Flyer shows. So there's tributes to artists, Stevie Wonder, Joni Mitchell, Paul Simon, so forth. There's tributes to albums. There's tributes to eras, British Invasion, tributes to famous concerts like The Last Waltz and Woodstock. And that's what I've been doing kind of for 20 years with some very good friends of mine, assisting in multitudes of ways. Much like office hours, it's kind of a group effort where if people didn't step up and do what you needed to have done, it wouldn't happen.
That's awesome. I was impressed amazingly by the diversity of the acts that you're involved with. I mean, when you can get Joni Mitchell's music and Nils Lofgren, or one of the heavier things, or Stevie Wonder from the R&B soul side, I mean, that's a pretty diverse thing. What's the most popular? What's most interesting? What are the most fun to do shows?
All of them, honestly. I hate to dodge that, but all of them are incredibly fulfilling. They all take months and months of work from lots of people. I kind of feel I've never really done this, but it's got to be somewhat like being in a theater play, like our community play. You come together for this period of time. You work really hard for a couple of weeks, couple of months, whatever it is. You put on this show, you become very close, and then it's over, and you're on to the next thing. And there's something that's, for my personality, which is I get bored easily, it's a lot of fun. Newmyer Flyer is a different approach. I am looking for shows to be successes that can be repeated, and to circle back to your question, I've got a couple of Newmyer Flyer shows that have done particularly well. One of them is called Laurel Canyon. It's all the music of the L.A. pop scene between 1966 and 73 or so. Pet Sounds era, Beach Boys, Jackson Browne, Linda Ronstadt, Joni Mitchell, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, the Monkees, a whole bunch of groups from that era. And that one's quite popular, I think, possibly helped by the fact that there's now 2 documentaries about Laurel Canyon have come out that kind of spurred people's interest. I have a Last Waltz tribute that's been running, that's coming up next weekend, actually, here in D.C. at the Hamilton. It's been running for 12 years. That's extremely popular. I have a Simon and Garfunkel show, a new one that's showing signs of that'll be an ongoing performing thing. And so I kind of have best of both worlds between BandHouse Gigs and Newmyer Flyer.
So it must be fascinating to think you're kind of in a build a band workshop mode here. How do you think about pulling in the right musicians and rehearsing through a catalog that is so beloved by people? What's that process like?
It's the most fun part is figuring out who the right people are to do the show. And I usually have a strong idea. Going back to BandHouse, once we determine a tribute subject, and my partners and I, Danny Schwartz, Chuck Sullivan is my main partner. There's several others. I could name all the names, but I'll hopefully get back around to them. But once we determine who we're going to do, then I start trying to think of, well, what voices would be great for this. And it's usually not trying to find somebody who sounds like the person you're doing. You actually don't want to sound too much like them. Sometimes you do, and it's fine, but that's not the goal. The goal is to find somebody who can do an amazing job on a particular song. Because the shows are one-off shows that aren't going to be repeated, BandHouse shows, we're usually looking for something that can come together in you can't do 6 rehearsals for a not-for-profit entity. So amazingly, the rehearsals, each song gets about 20 minutes at rehearsal. And so the musicians are told ahead of time, you can't come to the rehearsal and say, how does this thing go? What are the chords? What's the harmony? All of that has to be done in advance. And initially, it was difficult to get that across to people, but once you get the ball rolling and they can see by the results of the show that the standard is very high, then it becomes easier and easier. People understand you don't show up with 50 or 60 of the best musicians in the area and be the one that's unprepared. So there's very, very little policing that I have to do, or cracking the whip or anything, which is good because I can't do that anyway. So I rely on everybody coming with their best faith efforts, and fortunately, that's what almost always happens.
I see a lot of art here, and I think we want to get to seeing some of this. I think Marty has arranged to have some of the things. So can you talk us through some of this so people can get an idea visually of what these shows look like?
Well, okay, I'll talk about BandHouse Gig shows. Usually a BandHouse Gig show has somewhere between 50 and 75 musicians. So that'll include possibly a horn section, might be a string section, a pedal steel, there's a percussion section, there may be dedicated backup singers. Whatever we need to do to deliver the performance that we want, we make that happen. So the rehearsals, there's two main rehearsals for a BandHouse Gig show. The week of the show, each half of the show is rehearsed only on one of the 2 days, and as I mentioned, about 20 minutes per song. I contact all of the different people that I want in the show and mention to them all of the information that they're going to need, including that this is not going to be a lucrative gig, which is important and necessary, I think, to mention, because we're doing these in really nice venues. If you're familiar with the D.C. area, we've performed at the Warner Theater, the Fillmore, Strathmore, which is a beautiful 1,800-seat concert hall, the Strathmore Music Center, the Hamilton, the Barns at Wolf Trap, the Ram's Head in Annapolis. So we're in really nice venues, and people see there's 1,500, 1,800 people out there. There must be money coming in, and there is, but all of it goes out as a way of paying the 60 musicians. So I have 5 partners with BandHouse Gigs. We all dedicate every bit of our time, whether we play on the show or not. Most of us are musicians ourselves, and so we perform for free. Everybody else that is not a member of BandHouse Gigs is paid, and basically, we have a stage crew. We use a common set of backline, which is necessary, so nobody's coming on with their own amplifier. We're not changing a drum set. And we basically try and make sure that everybody that's involved in the show has a workload that they're going to be comfortable with. That's kind of one of the things I have to figure out. Some of the musicians that I'll invite, I know from knowing them, are going to be really happy to come on and do 4 or 5 songs, play on 4 or 5 songs. And if I push them for more than that, it might not go so well. So then there's others that are like, give me everything that you can. I'm really into this, and I'll put as much time as necessary into it. So you got to kind of determine who's in for what. And then we try and line up as best we can to have a smooth transition of show. And basically our stage crews are not generally full-time stage crew people. They're people, and they probably, if we did have full-time stage crew people, they would probably say you can't do this. But we, on our shows, sometimes have a full band changeover that is executed in like 90 seconds. So having grown up in the era where you'd see a 3-band show and it was 30 to 45 minutes in between each band, it's kind of remarkable to see this show flowing with 50, 60, 70 people, where between each song it's less than 2 minutes, and that's all credit to the amazing volunteers that we have doing that work.
Some of our panelists want to get in on this. Courtney, do you have a question?
Yeah, you kind of touched on what my question was going to be. Is do you have like your own wrecking crew of just the basics, like percussion, bass, rhythm guitar, lead guitar, and keyboards that stay in place, and then you bring in all the specialist musicians for horn sections or guitar soloists or others, depending upon who the subject of the tribute is. So do you have your own static, like this is kind of like is it done kind of like the Kennedy Center Honors, where they have a kind of a house band and then they bring in different musicians for individual pieces and of course different singers on each individual tribute? Or do you change
Not
up
exactly.
the whole band each time for each song?
Well, the answer is closer to the second thing that you said. We do try and line them up, but it's definitely not the same group playing as the rhythm section, because our shows are kind of extensive. We do really good deep dives. We don't just play, the 15 biggest hits of a group. When we do a Stevie Wonder tribute, we're doing songs off of albums that people go, oh, I can't believe they're doing that one, because it's a deeper cut that we like, and we know there's a lot of people like, even if it wasn't the most popular song from a record. So it's difficult to ask somebody to learn 30 songs for a show that's not going to pay particularly well. It's also a lot more fun to have the energy of all these different people. So BandHouse is built on this big collective energy, and that's what it always is going to be doing as long as it exists. Our smallest show is probably about 40 people when we perform at Barnes and Wolf Trap. It's a little smaller venue. So we try and keep a band up there. So sometimes I'll plan a show where I'll say, let's have 4 or 5 kind of core groups, each one with a drummer, bass player, 2 guitar players, and a keyboard player. And they'll do 6 songs in the show, and I'll try and line up those 6 songs so that we have a slot where we have a group up there for a quarter of the show at most, but it's not the whole show. On Newmyer Flyer, again, it's a for-profit entity. I structure it differently. Those shows are generally between, the biggest Newmyer Flyer show is probably about 27 people. A lot of them are between 15 and 20. Some of them are even smaller. I do try and have a core band, a core group, even though there's a lot of different singers on most of the shows. So it's 2 different approaches for BandHouse Gigs and Newmyer Flyer.
And what about your technicians? Do you have, they have to be fairly skilled at changeovers between all these musicians. Do you have the same set of technicians handling the audio changeovers and the setups and the bringing instruments in and taking them out from show to show?
We do. We've had a number of different people over the course of our 20 years, but Danny Schwartz, who is actually helping us conduct this interview and whose home I'm in right now, started as the BandHouse Gigs stage coordinator, head of production. And he's moved on because he's doing some, he's not moved on permanently, but he's moved on from being the only one that was able to do that. We've got several other people now, Tom Friedrich, Dave McKittrick, and some others. So we have some people that we use regularly that kind of know the drill and are comfortable with the chaos that will ensue when you have a show with that many people. And they're very cool and calm, and they're not threatening in any intimidating way. We kind of run on kindness, and that's the first thing that we're looking for before somebody comes into BandHouse, is somebody who understands this is not the time to establish I'm a big wheel here. Everybody is a small part of this big thing that we do. And as I mentioned earlier, the stage people we have, Danny's a professional stage guy, but he didn't start that way, and Tom Friedrich has been. But some of the people we do are just guys that know a lot, that were into amps and guitars, like Ken Farron, and they come in and they do this amazing work for us. And when you say we need this whole changeover within 2 minutes, they're like, okay, they'll do it, because they haven't been brought up to believe, no, you need 20 minutes between acts minimum. So it's worked to our advantage to have a mix of people who have had the experience and some who don't.
Yeah, it sounds like a great attitude, and attitude always encourages volunteers to keep coming back. Marty, you had some questions.
Yeah, hi. Some of the larger shows actually do involve quite a lot of people. If we could take a look at this slide, we could see, an example of a larger show that was done at the Strathmore Arts Center. If we could throw that slide up. So the D.C. area where you are working in, is blessed with a lot of really good musicians. The musician pool and the music scene here is very broad. How difficult is it to find, musicians who can pull off these tribute shows and play music that people are so familiar with so well?
It's amazingly easy in this area. The bigger problem for me is there's phenomenal musicians. I was in a place last night and bumped into a couple of people, and I was reminded I haven't had them on a show in like a long time. And some great musicians that are friends of mine, just because they don't cross paths with them all the time, have not had them on a show yet. So there's a lot of great musicians. And on our shows, we really reach out, and we have a lot of younger musicians, and we're constantly stretching the circle. All of the people, not all the people, lots and lots of the people on the show that I'll be working with will kind of vibe out what we're doing, and they'll say, hey, you need to know about so-and-so, or do you know this guitar player, this keyboard player, if you're ever looking for a drummer, blah, blah, blah. So there's lots of recommendations, and I get names from people all the time, and you can check out people fairly easily with the internet, of course, these days. When I'm going to work with a lead singing performer, if I can, I try and get out and see them in person, because you kind of want to really see how they relate to the audience as well, rather than just watching it on video. But there's plenty of great musicians and in all the different genres, and we try and be genre appropriate. So if we're doing a Joni Mitchell show, we're going to reach into the jazz community a little more. If we're doing a Stevie Wonder show, we're going to reach into the R&B community a little bit more, and try and find musicians that, you know, are steeped in the music that we're going to be doing.
Nice. Let's get to some of our audience questions.
Okay.
All righty. Thank you, Bill. First question up is from Douglas Carmichael, and he says, when creating a tribute show, do you aim for an exact note-for-note cover of the album track, or do you give the musician some liberties?
You mentioned that, but expand.
It's a combination of approaches. I would say this. Again, I'll speak now from a BandHouse Gigs perspective. So these are shows where almost every song, occasionally we'll make an exception, we'll have like an intact band on to do a couple of tunes on a show. But for the most part, it's build a band, as you say. Create a band. It's like an all-star team for this song, this singer, this guitar player, this drummer, and so forth. I'm sorry, I forgot the question. I just lost the track. What was that?
It was basically, do you try and cover it note for note?
Yeah.
To sound exactly like the album cover. Or
right.
do you let somebody take an unplanned solo?
So because many of the shows are one short rehearsal, putting together a uniquely derived, creative, original version of a song is really difficult. You simply don't have enough time to prepare for it to come off really well. There are exceptions. We work with a good friend of ours, John Carroll, who always puts a unique twist on a song, and he produces a complete studio demo with all the parts, explained, charts, and everything. So I can send that out beforehand, say this is how John wants to do A Case of You on the Joni Mitchell tribute, and he's got MP3 and everything, notes and everything. He's available if people have questions. So I can send that out, and once we listen to it and say, oh yeah, we love that, then we can send that out as if it's the original version. And we do sometimes look for great cover versions of songs to do so that there's something different rather than the original artist version. But I'll also point out, a lot of times when you see a show and there's an artist that's got lots of bells and whistles on the records, with backing vocals and horns and strings and little touches. A lot of times when you see the group playing live, you don't see all those little touches. And we take a lot of pride with BandHouse of being able to cover all the little touches, because it's a pretty unique thing to see downtown sung by someone where you've got the whole orchestra almost behind them of horns and backing vocalists and everything and percussion. So due to time, it's generally, let's stay pretty close to the record, but there are examples, and then there's times where we'll kind of say, you know what, there's a lot of versions of the song Woodstock. And so when we did that in our Woodstock tribute, we did a version that incorporated Joni Mitchell's kind of haunting, spooky original version, and ended up with Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young's Rockin' Out version with the guitar solos and everything. And it was a version in between that the artist who was singing it had come up with. And so we try and make sure there's some creativity and uniqueness in every show, but we can't do a whole show that way because of time constraints.
Do you ever run into a situation where someone has trouble covering one of those great studio musicians' parts? I'm thinking, when you're listening to Lady, that Louis Shelton guitar part is just so burned into people's heads that it's almost sacrilege to go away from it. And what do you do when you get in circumstances like that?
We work with musicians that can cover it. And sometimes they're good enough to cover it and they're kind of doing their own thing. And there's times when we kind of say, you know, all those guitar licks at the top of the song, those are stuck in people's heads. They're as iconic as the chorus of the song. You really can't play While My Guitar Gently Weeps and not do those notes. Prince could, but
exactly.
I just contradicted myself. So sometimes you will say, this part of the song, you got to have those licks. You don't have to have everything in the solo once it gets past the sing. You can do some free stuff. So we try not to be too heavy-handed, but we know what the audience wants to hear and expects to hear. And as I say, the shows are big enough that we kind of try and have a mix of things. So it's not simply that you're going to hear exact versions just like the record for the whole.
I would imagine so many musicians have come up hearing the Purdy Shuffle and Jeff Piccaro's drumming that they know the style, if nothing else, of what that original classic song was in.
Right. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Courtney, did you have a comment on that?
Wondering if you've ever reached out to, if you know who the studio musicians were that played on the album. Have any of them ever shown up to repeat their performance? Not the lead singer, but like the
we have
the wrecking crew that recorded it.
You're doing Glenn Campbell today.
Speaking of which. There's a great bass player, passed away some years ago, unfortunately, named Matt Cridlin. Matt Cridlin performed on, so we did an Alan Toussaint tribute in 2008 or 9.
Lovely.
Yeah. And Glenn Campbell, who you mentioned, actually covered Southern Nights. Matt Cridlin was on our show, and he performed, he was the bass player on Glenn Campbell's version of Southern Nights.
Nice.
So we have had a few things like that, Danny.
So you can stick in a few ringers here and there that know the song.
Yeah, John Carroll, who I'd mentioned earlier, he was in part of Starland Vocal Band, and he was in Mary Chapin Carpenter's band. He's performed with quite a few people. So yeah, we've had some people that have been on our shows that have. Skunk Baxter was on our first show. He was a pal of Nils Lofgren's. Yeah. He produced one of Nils Lofgren's albums, and he was doing work in D.C. and came to our attention and called him up out of the blue. I didn't know him, told him what I was doing, and asked him if he'd like to perform at the tribute for Nils, and he came and was great. Yeah.
And
not
Bill Kirchen.
Small discography. Go ahead, Marty.
Bill Kirchen, yeah.
Bill Kirchen from Commander Cody.
Yep. Yeah, he was on our last show. We did a show this summer at Strathmore where BandHouse Gigs began. It was called DC Legends, and it was a show honoring DC-based musicians, whether they were born here or spent significant parts of their career here. And, of course, Bill Kirchen lived here for many, many years, and although he's not from here and not currently living here, we still consider him our own, and so we had Bill Kirchen perform Bill Kirchen music on the show. That was one of the examples.
In the back channel, I saw Leon Russell's picture go by, and it just remembered, man, so many great studio musicians came out and just changed the music industry gigantically with their talent.
Yeah, Leon was a great example of that. Did you know he also co-wrote some of the Gary Lewis and the Playboys' early hits? He was a co-writer.
No, I knew he was on the Wrecking Crew as just a young keyboard player, and just his career, his whole arc of his career was just amazing. But there's so many people like that. I mean, in those days, they didn't give a lot of the backing musicians credit. Now we understand that the Carol Kays and Leon Russells and Hal Blaines of the world literally created the soundscape of our young lives and didn't get credit for much of it at the time. It's just fabulous there now. But there's so many good people out there. I'm just astonished. Let's keep going through. We've got some more questions here.
All right. Coming in from your neighborhood in Portsmouth, Virginia, Harold Williams wants to know, has anyone found AI plugins useful for live events? I've used Isotope, Smarty Q Live, and possibly one from Waves, but I still need to mix it myself in the inn. So are you using any AI?
My friends are laughing at this question only because they know that I have no clue how to answer that. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
AI is a little bit new for
idea.
just about everybody, and nobody even knows how it works. So hey,
I'm being told no. I'm being told no. We have by Danny, who does know.
Well, your
no
laptop
plans
or
for that.
computer, since Apple just announced a bunch of AI stuff inside of the new laptop. So I think everybody will end up having to come to terms with this one way or another. Let's go to the next question.
next one comes in from Walt Palmer in Red Booth Beach, Delaware. He says, "Are your shows strictly live, or are there streaming or broadcast events?"
Oh, okay.
They are occasionally streamed and recorded, and we have almost all the BandHouse Gig shows are videoed by our good friend John Collins. There's lots and lots of YouTubes from our previous shows up on his channel, which is called Happy Medium. If you research BandHouse Gigs or Happy Medium, you'll find a lot of information. I'm sorry?
Oh, great.
Yeah.
I don't think... Perfect. Let's go to our next question.
Okay.
Oh, didn't want to hear it. Okay, Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana, has a question. Have any of your one-off groups continued to do gigs together after the tribute shows end? Are there studio-quality musicians who can play almost anything with little rehearsal time?
Yes, there have been some groups that have stayed together. When we did our Jimi Hendrix tribute, we brought together a phenomenal young area guitar player named Jonathan Sloan and a great drummer named Darren Blessman for the first time, and they've been playing lots and lots of music in a number of bands. There's other examples that I can't remember off the top of my head, but that's one of the most rewarding things is when I bring people together that didn't know each other, and then I find out that, oh yeah, we asked Buddy Griffin to play pedal steel on our record, or we're using the Too Much Sisters, Kaz and Anita, to sing backups on our record. So yeah, there's a lot of examples where people make those connections, and it's a lot of fun to see. And
do most of your musicians read, and do they rely on charts to get through these, or do you have those musicians, and I guess this was in my head because of the Glenn Campbell mention, who famously was part of the Wrecking Crew and didn't read and was just so stupid good that he could fit into almost anything.
It's a combination. We have lots of really great musicians that sight read anything. You could put it down in front of them. But we're not handing them charts, so they've got to figure out their own parts, do their own homework, and prepare however they need to prepare for it. I'll send out an email. Once I determine all the people that are going to be on a particular song, I'll send a group email to all those people and say, here's who we got on the song. There's 2 guitar players. You guys should communicate about who's going to take which part and who's going to take the harmonies and so forth. So we have lots of people that also, the horn players are always reading charts. We have some great friends that write a lot of charts for us, Trevor Speck, Justine Miller. But we have lots of musicians that don't read or that will make themselves crude charts or just memorize. So it's a combination. We don't ever have anything where we have, difficult solos that are written out that we've got anything prepared to hand anybody or anything. So it's a matter of, again, just making sure when I sign something that they know we're expecting you to really nail this. And like I say, 99.9% of the time, we're thrilled with the work that everybody does.
Makes sense. Makes perfect sense. Next question.
Our next one comes up from Marty Atias, who's right here on the panel, so I'm going to let Marty ask you himself. Go ahead, Marty.
Yeah, I saw it. It occurs to me that there are a lot of cover bands all over the country, and it seems like there are a lot of bands that are putting themselves together specifically for tributes for specific artists, and they learn the whole songbook from that artist. And I've seen venues that actually book tribute shows or tribute bands, rather, quite frequently. So with the really high caliber of musicianship and performance that you're doing with BandHouse Gigs and Newmyer Flyer, wondering if you've ever thought of putting these shows on the road.
I would love to. I have the problem of what I seem to do well is organizing really large numbers of people, which is just about the world's worst business plan for a touring band, is have tons of people. So I've been focusing with Newmyer Flyer on having some smaller shows, and I've come up with a couple. My Simon & Garfunkel tribute has 6 people on it, so that certainly is I'm hoping that it'll be able to travel a little bit more. It's difficult to get something into a market where you have no contacts and nobody knows you. There's definitely an element of what is exciting about these shows is that people know the artists that are performing on them from seeing their bands and their performances in other groups around town. So it's a model that kind of works for this area because of that other component. It's not just hearing a great tribute and really great music. It's also, we kind of care about these people. To put it on the road, you need to have something kind of small and compact. I don't think an 18-person show, you don't see a whole lot of 18-person shows anywhere, and there's a good reason for that. But I would love to do it because it's fun. There's nothing more fun than playing for strangers that love what you're doing. And I've taken a couple of shows. I had a Burt Bacharach, Hal David tribute. And out of the blue, I got an invitation to perform it in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, where I don't know anybody. They didn't know anybody on the show, but they were interested because it was a Burt Bacharach tribute. And that was a thrill. It was fun going into a strange place. They didn't know any of the work that I'd done. They didn't know the lead performer on the show. And yet they came out in big numbers because they wanted to see a Burt Bacharach tribute. And so, as you're saying, Marty, there's a lot of tributes out there. There's groups doing, like bar band tributes, some of which are very good, not all of them, but some of them are great. There's national acts that are doing tributes on a scale. Joan Osborne sings Bob Dylan. There's a lot of tribute stuff in all. It's almost like pizza. There's incredible pizza. There's really bad pizza. And somebody's going to buy some of each kind. There's an audience for everybody. And there's some
people for whom any pizza is good pizza.
Right,
the horrible
right.
stuff.
And God bless them.
Yes.
Yeah.
They're keeping the supermarkets full of things that are similar to cardboard, but people buy them and enjoy them, I guess.
My last waltz tribute, if I might, 2 years ago, we were doing it at the Hamilton, and there's a national last waltz tribute that's been out for a couple of years, and it includes one of the Neville brothers and Warren Haynes from the Allman Brothers Band and Kathleen Edwards, and Robbie Robertson's given it his stamp and is kind of a executive producer on the thing, and before he died, and it was all pretty big names, and they ended up doing a show 2 blocks from where we were doing ours 2 years ago. And luckily, my show was on sale for about 6 weeks, 2 months before theirs was on sale, and we'd sold a good number of tickets. So they didn't blow us out of the water. We did pretty good that year. They also had a pretty good crowd, and I've been hoping and praying that they don't come back in November. And so far, they haven't come back in November. So I think we drove those varmints out of town.
You could name it Battle of the Band.
Yeah. There was, so at the
Our
end of
Robbie
the show,
Robertson is better than your Robbie Robertson.
Yeah, right. Yeah. They're doing a big Robbie tribute out in Los Angeles, I think, with a whole bunch of great people coming up.
Well
soon.
deserved. That was such an era.
Yeah.
And that guy in front of the band didn't do too bad either with his career, that Dylan guy. Anyway, next question.
Douglas Carmichael comes in with a question. He says, how do you manage a full band changeover in 90 seconds? When I've been on festivals, patching and line checks alone take longer than that. Do you store a scene in the console for each band after a rehearsal? You touched on some of this, but how do you handle that?
No, we don't store a scene in the console, but we do have really good sound crew people, and they'll take notes during a sound check, and we try and get a little extra time at the sound checks. What else you got to add on that?
Just whether there's scenes and consoles and things. So just the tech of it. What are the problems?
Basically, having the common back line is the main thing. So nobody's coming on with their own equipment. During the sound check, we try and get almost all the performers on stage at some point so that they're not walking on stage completely cold and worried about how it's going to sound. They got some idea. They've met the monitor guy, and they feel some sense of comfort of it's going to be okay up there. So it comes down to everybody being prepared. Pedal boards and guitars are a particular concern, and we focus a lot on that. We have our guitar techs that focus on that and that prepare everything and make sure everybody's got their batteries, and there's somebody tuning guitars backstage, so nobody's going on stage and going, okay, I got to tune up here. So it's just kind of being prepped and planned, and then letting them know that we're expecting a 90-second changeover and that we've done it at every show that we've done for 20 years, and they kind of, okay, I guess that can be done. So it wasn't that way in the beginning. There were people that were like, no, I need 5 minutes here, really, And we're like, we can't wait 5 minutes while the audience sits on their hands. So, but as I say, the stage crew are really good, really prepared. They know who might pose a problem, and they identify it and troubleshoot it before it's had a chance to become a problem.
Courtney, you had a follow-up?
Yeah, I was wondering if your keyboard players, if you're using synths to fill in with orchestra pads and so on certain songs where you may not have enough musicians to duplicate the sound that's on the album. Do they have to change patches if they're using synths, or do you just use pretty straightforward keyboards without a lot of synth stuff?
We do use some synths. We generally, on BandHouse shows, if there's horns, we're going to have real horns. If there's strings, we're going to have real strings. On Newmyer Flyer shows, they're a little bit smaller. I might have 2 string players on some shows, a violin and a cello, in the Burt Bacharach show. And then I'll have a synthesizer playing a string patch who kind of adds body to what they're doing, but you're seeing and hearing real strings, which is a nice thing. And then you're getting an extra boost on it from the string synthesizer. I don't like to use synthesizers to exclusively capture string and horns and other sounds, but there's lots and lots of sounds that they do really well. So it kind of depends on the show. It varies.
Marty, your follow-up?
From an audience perspective, I got to say that the changeovers go surprisingly smoothly and surprisingly quick. I know that you have a podium on stage, and you or one of your fellow presenters will come up and do a little banter between songs while the audience watches the musicians change over. And all of the non-portable instruments are already on stage and set up and wired in. So it's just a matter of moving musicians in and out. And
that's pretty much it. That's right.
It's one of the pleasures of watching the show is not just hearing the music, but seeing the musicians working and the different combinations of musicians that are playing each of these songs. And watching the changeover is kind of entertaining as well.
Yeah, I'm glad you appreciate that. It is amazing to see, and as I say, everybody that remembers shows where it didn't used to be that way, and it's a real tribute, as I say, to the crew that puts that together, that does all that work to advance everything, that makes sure everything is tuned, make sure all the chords are working, and if anything messes up, as it inevitably will, they're on it real quick. We try not talk too much in between songs. We're basically out there just to kind of like talk for a second and make sure we acknowledge the people who are leaving stage and the people who are coming on stage. On the certain shows, we try and supply some history, like in the DC Legend show where we're doing tributes to 24 different DC-based performers. We wanted to say something about, Bo Diddley and Emmylou Harris and all the different people that we were honoring that night. But a lot of times we're really just kind of trying to talk about, or mention the musicians, because it's a lot of people to introduce. We ask a lot of applause in having shows with 50 and 60 people. It's a lot of names to clap for, but the audience is always there for us. So
excellent. Next question.
Next one comes in from Harold Williams in Portsmouth, Virginia. And he asked, does the artwork used to promote the event come from the artist's past albums or the musicians that will be playing? And Marty's been throwing up some of those great posters that are used to promote those.
Yeah. Nice
BandHouse Gigs has a phenomenal poster artist named Dick Bangham. He has been doing work for Little Feat for many, many years. He's their graphics person. He's done a bunch of Little Feat album covers. He's done album covers for Nils Lofgren and many others. He's kind of a legend here in the D.C. area. And Dick has done almost all of the BandHouse Gigs posters and artwork and everything. Every time he does one, it's a big surprise and a big. He usually gives it to us, a month or so before the show, and it really kind of, it's like the start of the holiday season when we get Dick's artwork. What am I missing on this? What was the other part of the question?
No, I don't think anything. I think
Do you ever use the art from the original artist albums or something?
Yeah,
Or is
no,
that a
not
little
really. Sometimes there'll be like a treatment of an image. When we did our band poster, I'm trying to remember the photographers. Elliot Landy is a famous photographer, did a lot of pictures of the band and Bob Dylan. And I contacted him, and he was so kind to let us use a very famous image of the band standing in front of kind of a mountain. And Dick did a beautiful treatment, colorizing it and doing some different looks to it. And Elliot Landy was really happy with Dick's work and said he's seen a lot of versions of this picture, and that was the best one that he had seen. So that was a nice example.
Nice. Next question.
Next one comes in from Jeff Simmons in Seattle, I suppose. Ever do any DC punk or hardcore tribute shows? There was quite a scene in DC back in the day.
Is there a genre you stay away from, or are you open to all? Are we going to see reggae or heavy metal or something?
I'll be honest and say I doubt that you would see a BandHouse punk show, but on the DC Legends show, we certainly at least got close. We had members of Fugazi who performed in the tribute to Link Ray with a great guitar player named Anthony Parag. Joe Lally and Brendan Canty are the rhythm section for Fugazi, and they were part of that show. We also tributed the great DC band, kind of early punk legends, the Slicky Boys, in that show, and we had Mark Noon perform. The only reason I would say that is because knowing the people that are making the decisions, we're just a little older than the ideal age for the punk thing. And while I appreciate it and like it a lot more now than I probably did then, I would imagine we're not going to do a Sex Pistols tribute or a
Johnny Rotten
a punk era tribute. But it finds its way into, we did Clash songs on a British Invasion show. I'm not really calling the Clash punk, but we get close to it. But the real hardcore punk, it's also the kind of thing where I don't think punk really wants a tribute. It's kind of the exact opposite of the point of punk is, let's be original here. It's funny you mention that because this morning I was looking at the video this cool video of when Fear appeared on SNL. And Ian Mackay of Fugazi, the DC punk band, and a bunch of DC punks bust up to appear in the audience and to slam dance and kind of stage dive during the Fear performance. It's a pretty neat video. I happened to be watching that this morning. So
that never
so
trust
not
anyone over
anti-punk,
30 from the 60s
yeah.
is aging not particularly well.
I wouldn't trust me with a punk tribute. That's what I'll say.
There you go. Next question.
I'm too happy to be a punk.
Stage divers, yeah, exactly. The next one comes in from Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana. It says, what is your number one reason you want to keep producing these shows? And who were your mentors who showed you how to produce?
It's so gratifying to be at the center of this incredible energy that happens when we pull off one of these shows, because the music is really challenging. And I'm going to say I'm pretty proud of every show that we've done. There's some really amazing versions of iconic music, which, as you guys have mentioned, is hard to pull off. So I can't see stopping. I can't afford to stop. I love what I'm doing. I can't imagine anything more fun. As people get older, a lot of times your circles get smaller, you meet fewer and fewer people, you stay to yourselves. And I'm constantly able to meet and work with all kinds of great, fun new people, great musicians that we have on our shows. And I can't see any reason that I'd want to stop doing that. In terms of a mentor, I was asked this question once earlier, and I booted it, so I'm going to get it right today. My father was definitely my main mentor and inspiration. He was a part-time magician and a yo-yo champion, and just a very entertaining character. And I think he was the one that instilled in me the love of having an audience appreciate what you're doing. My older brother, Louis, also was a huge inspiration. He's also a bass player like I am. And he's one that exposed me to almost all of the great music that I loved. I'd wake up and there would be a Jimi Hendrix album, and I'd wake up and there'd be a Miles Davis album, and an album by some group called Love that I'd never heard of. So I would say those are my main two. And then I'm just fortunate to work with lots and lots of great people. There's no shortage of people with good ideas. And, if you look and listen, you're going to find them everywhere. So I'd also like to acknowledge a great mentor, Mike Schreiben, who was the Bill Graham of Washington, D.C., brought most of the great groups that we ever had here to D.C. for the first time, people like Bruce Springsteen and Little Feat. And he was certainly the guy that I looked at and was amazed by what he was able to do in terms of being behind the scenes instead of on stage. So Mike Schreiben as well.
Cool. Let's go to the next question.
Next one comes in from Auckland, New Zealand. Peter Moore wants to know, that given your experience organizing all the musicians on stage, what challenges would you think that the Rockin' 1000 show people have with their shows dealing with 1,000 musicians? If he has a link to this video,
Whoa.
You can see just the drummers take up about half the floor of an arena. So you can imagine what it's like keeping them all on beat. So what would you do in that situation?
That's astonishing. Wow. The biggest challenge that we have is scheduling rehearsals is brutal. It's a Rubik's Cube. You get 49 people lined up, and then one critical person goes, "Oh, I forgot. I'm booked that day," or "I can't get out of something I'm supposed to be doing," and you got to start all over, and it's miserable. That's about the only non-fun part of it is the scheduling of the rehearsals, I would say. How they pull together 1,000 people, I can't imagine. But I will just say that I'm grateful that one of my concerns isn't bringing in porta potties for the performers. That so I have a
getting them all
rough
through a
history
song
with
without
porta
taking a
potties.
potty break is going to be tough.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but the phrase "herding cats" came to mind. It's nothing like having 100 guitar players on stage.
You have to have a lot of patience for it, and I'm lucky that I let a lot of stuff roll off my back that probably would drive a lot of other people crazy.
Excellent personality trait, I would think, in your circumstance. Next question.
Next one comes in from Idris Hagi in Fairfax, Virginia. What do you look for when you're working with volunteers and crew members who want to contribute and learn from the concerts and producing gig house events, etc.? What do you think?
Well, we have a lot of volunteers with BandHouse Gigs. BandHouse is amazing. So when we do a BandHouse show, which are, as I mentioned, only 2 a year, we do a summer show at different places. Hopefully we'll be back at Strathmore again next summer, and we have a late winter, early spring show at the Barns at Wolf Trap. We have a Jackson Browne tribute coming up there in April, in fact. And what we look for is, as I mentioned earlier, kindness and somebody who really likes working with people. It's not good when people kind of want to, be in charge of anything, because the way a not-for-profit like ours works is that people aren't really, nobody's compensated, so you can't really demand anything of anybody. You can't push them too far because you're lucky that they're there at all. But just having, we were lucky. We have people who do backstage hair and makeup. Who is a woman, Barbara Roybal, who actually, when I had hair, used to cut my hair. And she now works for places like the Kennedy Center and does Kennedy Center honor shows and inaugurations. And she volunteers her time to come in and make everybody look great on the BandHouse shows. We have people who shoot photographs of our shows. Currently, Beth Harrison and Brooke Lowe have been doing the recent shows. We've had some great photographers in the past, Linda Parker and others. We have people who do videos of our shows. We have people who handle backstage hospitality. Ronna Fitzgerald is our current coordinator of volunteers. And so there's a lot of different jobs that go into making it. Because most of the musicians on our shows, with 60 people, 75 people on the last show, I would say the average pay is only $150. That's not a lot for somebody who's coming to a rehearsal and then coming to a show and they're learning some songs, whether it's 2 songs as a lead singer performer or 8 as a backing musician on some songs. It's a lot of work and it's not a lot of money. So it's nice that we can give them these bells and whistles of, oh, by the way, we have somebody doing hair and makeup backstage. By the way, there's going to be food at the rehearsal. By the way, there's going to be people taking videos and pictures and recording the show. And you'll be able to see some really top-notch 4-camera shot mixed audio videos on stage. These are all little perks that we can give the people who are performing on the show that is not money. And that only happens because of the graciousness of all the different volunteers. So we need a lot of different things and different skills, whether it's stage management or organizing the volunteers, whatever it is. So, but basically just coming in with a helpful, kind attitude is the first requirement. And the main thing after that, it's rock and roll. It's not that hard.
Courtney, you had a question?
I was just wondering if any of the venues that you use are union houses, and do you have to use the union houses, stock stage crew in those type of events, or do you just supplement them with your own?
Some of them are union houses. Strathmore is a union room, as is the Warner Theater, and when we work at those venues, we still kind of do the on stage moving around, but they transport everything into, they follow the union rules, and we've had no problems working with them. They've been great to work with. We've enjoyed all of the crews that we've worked with, and I think they probably enjoy the fact they don't have to do as much on a BandHouse show because we've got people that can, get that guitar plugged in and so forth. So
nice.
It's a combination.
For people who want to learn more about your organization, see some of this work, what are the contact things that you'd like everybody to know about, and how can people get more involved with supporting you if they'd like to?
Okay, thank you. BandHouseGigs.org is our website for BandHouse Gigs. I don't currently have a Newmyer Flyer website. I'm in the process of getting that. And you can find Newmyer Flyer has a Facebook page. BandHouse Gigs has a Facebook page. And my Facebook page, Ron Newmyer, frequently has me plugging both BandHouse and Newmyer Flyer events that are coming up. And that's probably the best way to reach us.
Perfect. Thank you so much for coming in and let us know what you do. It really looks fascinating. I know there are a lot of people who love the music of their lives that you are supporting here, and the musician communities that you're allowing to get to do what they love to do. And I know how tough it is to create an environment where people can do what they love successfully and feel like it's a good production rather than we've kind of fallen short of the mark. And it sounds like you've been doing that for a long time. So congratulations.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me in. Really appreciate it.
Always love to have you come back sometime. It's time to wrap things up for today. As always, for those of you who are paying attention, today we were expecting, and sure enough, there were some announcements from Apple about new laptops and things like that. So I'm sure on the show tomorrow, that will be an area of significant concern. Our typical Tulloch traversal to the end of the show, if you had been going around to to get these questions answered from all these experts in our chat groups and things like that, you would have had to travel 41,000 miles. That is 66,000 kilometers, 326 million. Bananas for Scale. We'll be back tomorrow with another show. Thanks for watching.
Thanks, Ron.
Yep, that was fun.
Yep.
All right. Marty, thank you for helping facilitate everything.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly, my pleasure.
Who knew there were so many tributes in D.C. area?
It's a big music market. Huge.
Yeah.
I bet it is. There's so many functions, so many fundraisers and things go on there. I imagine that entertainment, there's a robust marketplace for people who can entertain.
We have some incredible venues, both large and small, and a lot of outdoor events. It's a very cool market for music.